Okay, we should be live.
All right, it's 5:15. I'll call the committee meeting to order. First thing up is the Little Saints Child Care Center update.
Well, this is good news. I had originally wanted to give you an update because it looked like the budget was not going to allow for any money to go to state daycares at all. But at the 11th hour, something changed, and there were huge numbers of people calling their legislators, and I think it made a difference. So we are not, we get a certain amount of money every month. I think it's been $1,300 in this last round of granting, and we thought that was completely done. It is not. We don't know how much we're going to get, but it's going to be probably not too much less than $1,300 a month. And the legislature is also going to pay $100 extra per baby, which means, babies, you can't make any money on babies because they take so much care. So that's going to be helpful. And they also relaxed the staff ratios a little bit, so we might be able to add a couple kids. So it was going to be bad news, and now it's good news.
What is it says $3,600 per month.
So that was where they started. So they started, when COVID first happened, we got, really it was amazing, a ton of money, and then it dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped, and it was down to $1,300 at the last. We were hoping it would go back up to the original amount, but to be honest, at this point, we thought it would be absolutely nothing. So every little bit is a celebration.
I get a kick out of the dump truck picture.
Well, so you know what that is? That's
the dump truck.
Yeah, we have a garden there. So there's a garden. I should have put one of the cute pictures, but kids and watching a dump truck, that's just so adorable, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that was Hancy Fox's brother, Kyle Swenson, donated that whole thing full of dirt for the garden beds that Chris Chelberg had his kids make. So now there's like 7 gardens out there for the kids to explore every day.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Any other questions or comments on the child care updates? 166 still on the waiting list.
Yeah, and that's now there's a new one opening up in Milltown, so we'll see. They just have started taking families.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens with that, but so far we are holding steady. And if you go to Little Saints, you love Little Saints. Our families love it there. Our staff is very loyal.
Speaking of that, we haven't had any departures with the Milltown One staff.
We've only had one departure from a staff this year, from a staff member this year, and it wasn't to Milltown. Our staff, we have, with the exception of 2, I would be surprised if anyone ever left. They love it. They love it. So we have 2 of them that may want to make a change, but our staffing is solid.
Very good.
Thank you for the questions.
All right, next is the directive of the admin to incorporate the board-approved list and description of the student academic standards. I'll stop there.
Yep, and so that's a requirement on an annual basis, and just like last year, I'm telling you once again, the district uses the DPIs to develop the state standards.
All right, and that's something that we approve, right, in the next portion?
Correct.
Okay, the next item is the adopting a resolution for the 25-26 school year to possibly use independent hearing officers to determine student expulsion cases, which we have done in the past.
Yeah, you have the capability to do that. In order to do that, you have to adopt a resolution saying you may do that, and so this resolution gives you that authority. To be very clear, an independent hearing officer would make the determination of the expulsion, not the board. So using a hearing officer, an individual that actually runs the meeting, and they're not making the determination, they're just running the meeting, that's not technically an independent hearing officer. That's a hearing officer, but they're not independent. All they're doing is running the meeting. An independent hearing officer would be employed if you had, let's say, potential conflicts of interest among the board where you're unable to get a quorum, or you don't feel you can render a safe decision in terms of an expulsion because there's too many corollaries or ties to the student or the circumstance that board members And in that case, the board can opt to use a hearing officer, an independent hearing officer that would not only hear the case, but also render a decision on your behalf. That's allowable under statute if you adopt the resolution. So I think the odds of using that are slim, but you'd like to have that possibility given the, close-knit nature of the community.
Any questions on that? All right, we'll move on to the 4th grade promotion and retention policy.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the board update, this policy is a direct result of Act 20, which is the reading legislation that was adopted 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago. And one of the expectations of the law is that we are to incorporate a policy that handles retention from 3rd grade or promotion from 3rd to 4th grade with respect to and related to reading proficiencies of individual students. So that information in terms of the policy is provided for you here. What we are recommending, Brian Cray, our curriculum director, as well as Rita Platt, the elementary principal, had some feedback with respect to the development of the policy, and it is based off of a draft that the DPI provided. One of the aspects that I'd point to is that it's very clear in the policy that the district, the school will work with parents to the best of our ability, and the idea that it's just not a de facto guarantee that a kid is going to be retained for sure just because of their failure to meet a benchmark or two. If we know that we're seeing some progress and we can develop a remediation plan or a plan with parents that they're comfortable with to address any potential issues. There is a wealth and litany of documentation with respect to retention and the fact that it most of the time doesn't do a ton in terms of assisting a student in gaining skills. There's typically more negatives associated with that, but I say typically because there's always exceptions. But the lump sum is that we're obligated to create and develop the policy, and we have done so here. The last thing I would point out is that the last possible date this can take effect is September of 2027. We have intentions of engaging and following the policy during the 25-26 school year and the 26-27 school year, but we would not be obligated, as is listed there, that it doesn't technically take effect until September 1st of 2027. That's allowed in statute. That's the latest date we can say it applies. So we'll use it as a guidepost up until then. You may see some tweaks over the next year or two before it's fully implemented, because what we would like to do is retain 0 kids and ensure every kid is meeting and exceeding all of the benchmarks, which I anticipate we're going to have in most of the cases. But it'll allow us also an opportunity to identify individual, student circumstances that we may want to look at the policy and reflect how we could be tweaking and make it better if we feel our hands are tied or if it's doing something we didn't anticipate it doing. So that's the idea too behind not technically implementing the policy in full effect until 27.
Rita, can you speak to the personal, what is it?
Personal reading plan.
That's
That's
all developed, is that?
it's a part of the law, so it's prescribed how it's developed. We have screeners that are also prescribed by the law. This only applies to the end of 3rd grade, but we do it in all grades. And then if a student falls below the 25th percentile on any of the screeners, which means tests, basic tests, we sit down as a team and say, do we think this kid needs extra instruction? Sometimes they don't. They just don't do well in that type of test, but the other 3 assessments show they did great, so we're like, nope, pass. We still have to document it for the state. If we do think they need extra support, that's the plan. We develop a plan that says they'll get this many minutes from a reading specialist, this many times per week using this program. That all is part of our EduClimber reporting system. So we develop it in EduClimber, and the law says we have to send it home to parents. None of this is new. We did all this before the law, just FYI. And then the parents sign it, and that's what it is. I mean, what it is, Ronnie, it's intervention.
Right,
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if there was some formal document. It
There
sounds
is a
like there
formal
not.
document, yeah, and there always was, but this one now we use exactly what the state told
And it
us to use.
says, for any student who has not exited their personal reading plan, does
So-
that mean that they
Yeah.
no longer need one?
They carry it over, so each reading plan goes for about a trimester.
Okay.
And then they either at the end you say plan not needed, finished plan, or continued plan.
Okay. That's what I'm doing. Thank you.
Mhm.
questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the crime reporting in our high school.
Another new statutory requirement as outlined in Act 12, adopted in 2023. High schools, public high schools in the state of Wisconsin are obligated to report various crimes that occurred during the school day or on school property or school-related events as a result of this act. What I provided to you was a PDF of the actual survey that I'll fill out after board action on this topic. We have under statute until July 31st to submit the report. The reason that you would kind of hold off and wait till the last possible moment to submit is the fact that if anything would transpire between now and the end of July, we would have to amend the report arguably. So for us, what we'll put down is 2 disorderly conducts. That's the information that we got from our local municipality via Josh Tyler, our school resource officer. I would also point out that there are sometimes circumstances that transpire that we're unable to independently verify whether or not an event that happened technically is criminal conduct that happened in the school building, because we don't identify whether it's criminal conduct. That's not the school's purview. It's inappropriate conduct, it's a behavior issue, and we deal with it as such. And whether or not there's criminal proceedings or other, judicial sort of action as a result of human services or whatever the case may be is not really under our control. Ironically, with many students, it's not public information and we're not able to independently verify. So if a kid committed an act that's considered a crime on school property and then they're subsequently tried for what we think is that crime, it would be incumbent upon us to verify in some capacity that the crime the kid was charged with is in fact the crime the kid committed while he was here in school. And we have no ability to independently verify that because we would not have access to those reports. So I'm not sure if that's making sense, but this is based off of legal guidance from the DPI, as well as legal guidance from our own attorney with respect to how you do this reporting. This reporting is, this is the first year that schools are required to do it, and I think that there might be some tweaks as time progresses, but I also don't anticipate that you would see a ton of reporting coming from schools like St. Croix Falls and the like, because frankly, there's just not a ton that happens criminal-wise in our school district. So we'll report 2 disorderly conducts and see what transpires. I'm not sure what the legislature and the state intends to do with the data. I would also mention, because I would be remiss if I didn't, I affectionately refer to this bill as the further vilification of public schools bill, because I see no other reason why you would require that to be put out there, because clearly crimes occur every place in society, not just in public schools. So it's interesting, and it's a little aggravating, but we'll report as we need to.
But as your comment when you first started talking about this is only public schools have to
Yeah.
turn this in, correct?
Yes, and schools that receive voucher dollars. However, I would just point out that schools that receive voucher dollars have a much lower bar in terms of entrance into said schools and retention in said schools and due process. And so if I have a kid that's a little bit of a problem in a voucher school or a private school, I might just say, you don't need to come back. So it's not really a legitimate representation of reality, because it's not like crime only occurs in public high schools or voucher schools or any school for that matter. And the schools do not commit the crimes individual human beings do, and individual human beings comprise all of our society in every aspect. So yeah, it's, in my opinion, it's meant to vilify public schools further. That's the only goal. Now, will legislators tell you that? No, it's because they want taxpayers to be able to make an informed decision about their school. Well, if I operate a high school of 1,400 or 2,000 kids, there's going to be some things that go down in that high school because it's a mini city that you're operating. And as a public school in particular, you serve all kids. You are required by law to serve any kid that resides within your boundaries or applies appropriately via open enrollment. You don't get to pick and choose. And I think the irony for me is the idea that somehow the high school is complicit in this, which is aggravating. Because I can tell you that if I was responsible for any high school in the state of Wisconsin in which I could pick the students I wanted to attend there, it'd be the best damn high school in the state of Wisconsin. Just saying that. And we do pretty good anyway, you know what I'm saying? So, anyway, so yeah, I'll get off my high horse, but generally, it was to inform taxpayers about what's happening in their schools. That's the political backdrop.
So at the end of July, you basically will fill this form out, and we'll have the two, at least two things on there, and that's it.
That's correct. As far as I know, currently, two disorderly conducts, and we'll submit the report, and what happens with the data, your guess is as good as mine, we'll see. I mean, clearly, even if we reported absolutely everything, because we were able to independently, we're not talking about a dozen things out there that we can't report, we're talking like last year, one other circumstance, so this is not, for us, really a huge deal. But I do think of, other districts that have, again, a larger population or in different demographics or whatever the case may be, and I can't even imagine what it's like to create these reports in other certain areas of the state. And it's not going to benefit the school, I'll just say that.
Any other questions, comments?
Is the report applicable to only students, or would it apply to any sort of criminal behavior that takes place within the school?
That is an excellent question, Dawn. I think,
It doesn't look like in the documentation that it specifies, and I didn't go up to like the statute to read it specifically.
yeah, you know what, I don't know the answer to that question. The only way I ever interpreted it was student-based student issues. And frankly, we would have no, staff or adult issues to report anyway. But that's an excellent question, and I'll get an answer to that, because I don't know.
Well, staff isn't the only other people on the property.
Yeah,
We have
staff or community
football,
members or adults, correct.
Wrestling, yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the seclusion and restraint report for 24-25.
So the seclusion and restraint report comes on an annual basis too. The 24-25 report there is provided to you. As you can see, we're significantly down in terms of seclusions and or restraints. There's really not a ton that go on, but you can identify the level, the building, and the level that they're at, as well as the number of students that are involved in those things. And in most cases, we're talking about one or maybe two kids that have multiple entries, as it were, but frankly, the numbers are quite low.
Any questions or comments on that? Move on to the elementary handbook changes.
There's not many changes. I gave you a cheat sheet in there. The only changes are that we updated the staff information, the meal prices, and then we added a page with kind of abbreviated information from the policy on retention. Otherwise, it remains the same.
All right, any questions on that? Hearing none, we'll move on to the middle school handbook.
Not a lot of changes in the middle school handbook either. Updated or added that AI section there to match the high school handbook. And then for some reason, middle school track wasn't in the handbook. It's been around forever, but it wasn't in there. So I noticed that and we added it. So other than that, pretty much the same as last year.
This isn't anything to do with the handbook. When I saw this, it made me think, do we, I know Brian's not here, but do we block any of that AI, like from the district computers?
Yeah. Yeah, so with AI websites and services, we're in the process of evaluating what are educationally relevant, what are not. What's interesting is that when something new comes online, it's not as though it's going to be unilaterally blocked.
Right.
So part of it is us learning what's happening too and whether or not there's relevance to it. But most of what we're engaged in with respect to the AI language is about ensuring that students know that they're not using it as, they're not putting it off as their own work, that it would be considered plagiarism or cheating to use AI to generate a paragraph or a paper on your behalf, or even a PowerPoint presentation or artwork, whatever the case may be. And with respect to staff, it's centered around pupil confidentiality and ensuring that we're using AI in the manner that it does not compromise pupil confidentiality or other sensitive topics. So for example, we were just talking about today in an admin team meeting, staff-wise, you might use AI to assist you in writing some goals for a special education kid, you know, wordsmithing some goals. And if you said, give me, you know, a reading goal for a child that's 10 years old with ADHD or with, I mean, I'm not sure about a reading goal, but you could tell you. And you plug that in, but it's non-descriptive. You're not saying a student by this name that's in grade 3 at St. Croix Falls, you see what I'm saying? And it produces that, that's completely allowable. But if you were to put that information into AI, there's multiple AI sites, the name of the student and maybe testing data, because you're asking AI to create a graph or identify areas of concern with this group of students that I input. If you did that on some publicly available AI, you're compromising student confidentiality because that information may not be retained in a confidential fashion by whatever that entity is. We're scratching the surface of that of it currently. So are staff members doing that? The answer to that question is no, but they're also learning on a regular basis what you can all use AI for. And one of our own staff members said they use AI regularly to find coupon codes for various things they purchase. And I'm like, I'd never even thought of asking AI about a coupon code. So it's both of those things. It's about responsible use, but it's also, it's not about limiting use to the degree where it's like banned, where AI is not allowed. So very similar, I think there's corollary conversations to the old days when you know, Google hit the scene more hardcore in like the late 90s, and everybody was up in arms for so long about, well, how are we supposed to do when you can just Google and get an answer? Similar to, you're not going to always have a calculator in math class. Well, now you can Google and get an answer, and you're always going to have a calculator, you know what I'm saying? So it's about operating within that context, ensuring that kids are using it correctly for their own benefit, as well as ensuring staff are using it responsibly so that they're not put in a compromised position in the district. So we're not down that path, but really that's been the two tracks about responsible use in terms of plagiarism and cheating for kids, and for staff it's really centered on pupil confidentiality. We were just talking again today too. There's apparently what used to be awesome was called Magic School.
Magic School.
But what's more awesome now is School AI or something like, and it's just like, so as we are intentionally not specifically spelling out certain AI sites that you can't go to. What we're doing is identifying things that you can't engage in, if that makes sense. Specific and you know, items that we can communicate. So yes, there will be sites that are banned when we identify, that are blocked, I should say, not banned, but blocked, when we identify there's no educational relevance, for example, or, you know, it's just an unsafe site to be at because anytime you put information in, they sell it to China or something like that. You know, I don't know these things currently, but that's been the approach thus far.
Either at this level or the high school level, but we're also not saying, you know, that a teacher can't have a topic or a lesson on it to say, all right, we're going to use it to create a, you know, video or something like that, you know, so they can still do that, yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Wilson, up to the high school.
Yeah, a few changes, some just logistical pieces and some language pieces, some updates on, you know, graduation requirements for the new graduating class coming in. A couple of sections to note that I had shared with you would be the AI conversations, which we just talked about. Reviving the student board member liaison. We've revived that this year, and we've got the senior has applied and been selected, and the junior alternate rep has been selected, so we'll be moving forward with that starting this school year. So adding some language into the handbook for that. And then I think the only other big piece would be adding a piece of language about terminating, the ability per state statute to terminate open enrollment if a student is habitually truant. So that language is not in the handbook, and it should be. You know, that opportunity is there if need be. So, like I said, otherwise, just a handful of changes, and some of them are more cleaning up some language and logistical pieces.
Any questions?
Do you intend to update the board section? I didn't see it in your change cheat sheet. It's steep on listed.
Oh, yes, yes.
Are any of the policies that we just talked about, would those require changes for the handbooks?
Yeah, so the AI policy that we talked about, or acceptable use policy that we talked about and approved last month,
Yep.
that language is borrowed from that policy and incorporated in these handbooks. So that's part of the reason we got that taken care of last month.
But any of the ones we talked about, the items we talked about today, do they have to be updated in the handbook?
The
If
Act,
they're
the
approved,
Act,
the Act.
20, yeah, the Act 10 does, and it's,
It's
that's
in
what the
there.
update is,
It's,
yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to the school board goals. Hopefully you all had a chance to see the email that came out early this morning. My apologies for not getting it done sooner. Yep. All right, so hopefully I captured a lot of what we talked about in the meeting, and potentially added some things. Anything that is bold in there, like the quarterly presentations, is just stuff I threw in there. The timing, we can discuss it when we would like that, and I know Craig talked to the admin team too about what's more pertinent. Sometimes it may be better to have as needed versus just saying we're only going to do it quarterly or stuff like that. So you just want to go one by one, start at the top. All right, so the first one, again, that deals with mental health and inclusion and well-being. The goal statement, the board will promote and support district-wide efforts to enhance the mental health, inclusion, and social emotional well-being of students and staff. The board is committed to understanding and advancing this work by receiving quarterly presentations or whatever we deem from district leaderships on the initiatives, supports, and outcomes related to mental health, inclusion, and social emotional learning. Supporting the developmental and implementation of a centralized framework or platform where the staff can easily access programs, resources, and professional development. And I think, Tashina, that's where you were kind of talking about, something where people could go find resources if they needed it, or even, potentially board members or whatever. Ensuring the creation and maintenance of a resource tracking system to log. And I don't know that we talked about this one so much, but it was something that I thought, maybe at the end of the year, we could get it summarized again, because we start hearing stuff maybe in September, October, and then by June, when we're talking about it again, we don't always remember what all happened throughout the course of the year. So it just basically could just be a report that we get to. It wouldn't have to be a big presentation or anything like that. And of course, recognizing the people that are doing the work, in those initiatives, which could be basically anybody, bus drivers to principals and support our superintendents.
The only feedback our admin team had in that regard was, rather than quarterly presentations, it'd be less specific to say periodic presentations, because you'll hear information, excuse me, your board update that's shared at the building level, that's just included from, something that Rita did that the last couple of weeks, or whatever the case may be. There's likely going to be times where there is a new thing or a grant or something that we're going to do a brief board presentation on, but very clearly there'll be periodic opportunities. My concern with quarterly presentations is the fact that, and I mean admittedly, if quarterly is what you want to see, that's no problem, but there may be times where we say, look, there's really nothing new to report at this time. or recycling other information that you've already seen. And if we have that capability of periodic updates, I have no question that you'll get stuff via the board update and as needed at various board meetings when something relevant does arise.
I think the kind of our discussion around having regular presentations was that we'll hear about something as a new initiative, and then we don't really get that follow-up. And we don't necessarily have to in every regard of education, but because we have a goal around mental health, we wanted to kind of understand a little bit more about what we're doing. And that, so the point of the quarterly presentations wasn't necessarily to learn about the new stuff, but for us as a board to know what's actually going on, to say we understand what we do and we know how this works for our kiddos and our staff.
Yeah, I agree, yeah, because it's kind of a reminder too, like we might have one staff person do a presentation quarterly on their initiative, even if it's already been in place, and we get to hear it, comment. It's a reminder to that department or staff person too that we need to hear that stuff is actually happening, how extensive is it, etc.
I totally agree that I'm not committed to quarterly presentations, but I just want all the stakeholders to understand where our discussion was coming from. It wasn't necessarily, hey, we want to know when new initiatives come in, because I think that's when we're very well informed. When the new stuff comes in, we always hear about it and we get excited and we're on board. So it was more about, what does this look like boots on the ground right now? And for some of us that have been on the board longer, we've seen things over the years, but it doesn't hurt to refresh what happened 10 years ago.
I think carving out or using the terminology progress on initiatives as well as new initiatives might make some sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the quarterly, I think, just without an expectation, my thought that it's regular, like it's a reminder for us and for staff and departments, this is a thing.
Well, how about if what we do is the admin team and I, at our next meeting, come up with basically a listing of the things that we are engaged in currently and a bit of a progress on that, or where we're at, or where we've been, and where we're going, as well as some of the new items that we may be aware of currently as a starting point, at which case then I think board members would have the ability to say, let's hear more about this at some point in the future, and we can earmark those things to be specific, because part of the conversation among the admin team, and again, I'm not against it, I get where you're coming from, is us ferreting out and identifying specifically and explicitly what you'd like to hear more about. Because there's guidance lessons that are considered mental health and social emotional supports. There are programs, there's a speaker that you can have come in. Well, you don't need a quarterly update on a speaker, we have a speaker, you know what I'm saying? So if we can ferret out what specifically, like, the program Darrell implemented last year in conjunction with the county, is that maintaining, and are we continuing to do that, and what kind of benefits are we seeing as a result of it? Those sorts of things. If that's more clarified based off of the list that we generate or the topics that we generate, whatever the case may be, then I think it would be a foreseeable or achievable thing to say, okay, well, no problem. Then in December we're going to do this, and in February we're going to do that. You know what I mean? Otherwise, I think we're grabbing at things that we think you want to know more about, but I don't know that you necessarily do. And I recognize you would listen to anything we're willing to present to you, but part of our rub is for us to say, well, what do you think they want to hear about? That's kind of what we're talking about. I'm not sure. Because also, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, I promise, is that when you're like bathed in it, you're doing it, it's like, it's someone asking, like a mom to say, describe to me what it's like to be a mom. You're just a mom, so that's kind of pared down, probably a poor example, but that's kind of what we go through, like it's just part of what we do on a daily basis, you know what I'm saying?
We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And we don't know what we don't know. either, so we need to
Right.
kind of get to the root of that.
So I think if we identify like some of the things we have done and are doing, and potentially some plans, and I say potentially because in the short term, I'm not keenly aware of anything, well, we're gonna do this for sure, you know, come September, that kind of thing. Then I think we can put together something that makes sense to you rather than this 30,000-foot view of, look at all the cool things we're doing and then we don't talk about it again.
It also prevents the admin team from wasting their time pulling together presentations that
Right.
are not necessarily keen
And
on.
if we're spitballing here, you know, just see what sticks, you know, for the high school counselor. What does he or she do? I don't know who counselor is.
Well, at all three levels. I
Yeah,
think.
towards
Because
mental
they're
health,
all-
yeah, right, and then, you know, we've heard about, health class, I think. You know, that was cited as a unit that, you know, talks about mental health and bullying and everything, so what's in it? So maybe that person presents.
Yeah, I think in education, it's always included the math, English, science, social studies, the extras. We kind of know as board members what's in those classes and not the newest initiatives. We don't really know. I mean, when we were growing up, mental health in the school districts just they weren't married yet. They weren't together, so I don't think as board members we really have a good idea of what that looks like yet.
Well, and I'm refreshed to see that at the state level, at least, there's beginning some conversations that are actually rational, which is, this is not a problem that schools are the only entity that needs to solve.
Right?
And it wasn't until this past year that that statement was actually made by someone in leadership, which is, I mean, thank God. Because here again, we're a reflection of our community / society, and we did not create mental health issues at school. Now, when we have deadlines for a test, maybe that creates a mental health issue, some anxiety for kids, but on the same hand, some of the things that our clientele are dealing with are not, you know, we're a part of the solution to the problem and need to be at the table. But I also think that looking to schools to be the panacea is an issue, and it's bad, because it's the only venue it's been talked about in, rather than holistic supports about, you know, incremental changes we can make across broader society.
Towards that end, one thing that I think that is, like I commented when we were brainstorming this, is, speaking of my own childhood, there was a lot of discussions and exercises, et cetera, on these initiatives in like elementary school. And then they decline, and then they're almost gone. At high school, I expect that's kind of the case still. So, like middle school, high school, we're forming future community members and future parents, et cetera, and all we can do is try to, you know, with what, the 7.5, 8 hours a day that they're here for 260 some days out of the year. And like you say, you've got a whole world out there, parents, community, et cetera, but if we can, yeah, just kind of remember that we're part of trying to make, you know, empathetic, responsible children that will become adults someday.
Absolutely.
Can we talk a little bit, board members, about that second bullet point? I know that we were made aware of a centralized location for information. And that, I mean, that's done and we understand that. But I remember delineating in our discussion something entirely different. And I think Tashina had some great and bold ideas related to that. And I think that's what this second bullet point's aiming at. But I don't feel like it quite articulates what we're getting at yet. Tashina, do you have any feedback? Do you remember? I know we were talking about it as a toolbox.
Yeah, we talked about a bunch of things. But yeah, the word toolbox was used, but mostly it was all of our initiatives that we're doing across the buildings. Is there some type of store, like a toolbox, a storing system, some type of record of, okay, here's how we approach bullying, and here's all the resources we use. Some type of reporting that, like, school board member, anyone else could go and see, here's, if someone asked me on the street what we do to approach mental health, I could could go to this resource and be like, oh yeah, mental health, this is what we do.
That would help our educators and professionals as well to know, okay, I see this thing going on, how do we
Like a shared
systemically-
folder, but not a shared folder.
Like,
I don't know if
like,
it can be a shared folder.
did project for Kirk, perhaps? I don't know.
We do have one at the elementary school, a comprehensive website that has, it's not available to the public though, but you guys can have it.
Yeah, we weren't thinking, I mean, we already have the public one,
Yeah,
right? That's
right.
kind of what Shelley did
Yeah.
last year, so we're,
Yeah.
yeah, we were just thinking more along the lines of what
Internal.
internal, like she said, if
Yeah.
a teacher, like, new teacher comes in and says,
Yes.
where's my coding resources or whatever.
Yes, we do have that, absolutely comprehensive.
So you have it at the elementary, is there one at middle and high school?
And
And
are
could we
they
do a
the same,
district
or are they,
We're not, I want to keep mine because our resources for our age is different, and we use different programs. But I'd be happy to share it with you guys if you
Yeah.
want to see if you want to do
They'd be
it.
able to
I
use
mean,
Yeah,
it.
it's
it
such a
takes a
different-
lot of time to do that.
I
I
can
had, a
imagine.
teacher took a class on how to make that, and then we worked together through her graduate studies to make that repository warehouse.
So it may not be something that we can accomplish in one academic year, but it's certainly.
No, but it
something
may be,
we can look into.
could be simpler too. I mean, ours has to have videos of, we teach really little kids, has to have social stories about, it's just.
I know. They're fabulous. I don't know if we need to clarify the wording on our goals so much as that we needed to clarify in the room kind of what our discussion was and what we were looking for, because reading that, it almost sounds like it's already what's out there, what's on our website. And I think what we were
Yeah,
looking
that's
for
what
was a
I
little
liked.
bit different.
Well, we can reword it, at least say internal,
I think that was,
Access.
yeah.
like that.
Centralized internal framework.
Yeah.
And I think, Mike, you did do that. You had it, you have it on an Excel, you did it for
Yeah,
us
we
years.
had, so years ago, we started
Yeah.
a list, a warehouse, I mean, we're
Mhm.
talking 6, 8, 10,
Mhm.
maybe years ago.
I still reference
With
it.
Maria and Denise and
Mhm.
I, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
And when we had an ongoing spreadsheet with,
guess what?
But it was
Maria,
less
Denise,
resources.
Mike,
Right.
and none of them.
exactly. But I still have to Google Doc somewhere.
Word for it.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It was less of a resource area, more of a what's been done list, if that makes sense.
So in an academic
Presentations,
year,
the-
we did this,
Right.
this, and this, to make
Exactly.
sure that all of the topics had been hit over the course of an academic year.
And it was a warehouse of,
That's
a warehouse of, this guest speaker, and this was done in health class, and this was done in middle school guidance, and it was a very comprehensive list
Yeah,
that we kept
links.
going, and
We use, I still reference it, links to resources so you can find out. I remember we had this guy, yeah, it's really helpful.
So that kind of covers the third one, then, it's kind of what we're kind of looking for.
Research and
Not that we
trial
need to
systems
see
for
every
Yes.
line of it, but
And it sounds like it might be easier for administrators to make that report annually.
Right.
If it was
Yeah, and the report would require that log to be dusted off, updated and shared.
we'll do some digging.
Well, now you know what the conversation was.
Right. That's all fine.
Yeah, I almost feel like when we make our goals, we need to have a second meeting with the admin to integrate, which I guess is what we're doing now, but it sounds like you guys had a conversation without really understanding what, fully what we, so. This is the second step, and then admin meeting again, independently.
anything else? Do we need to change the verbiage at all outside of periodic presentations on the first goal?
That second one to have the central.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay.
Instead of development, if there is something internal, would we want that to be more of like an enhancement, kind of like a revision, or
For both, right?
see something already in place instead of like,
Yeah, so like an or statement?
yeah,
Development
potentially.
or,
And really like that fourth bullet point, I think that we had been doing as many staff recognition and recognizing our staff as well as our students who was a champion. Recognize it.
I have a question, just on this whole topic. Some kids seek out like a teacher or staff person that they feel like gets him or her. It's informal, right? Like they just kind of gravitate. Is there ever has anyone ever heard of a thing where a staff person is almost assigned to a kid that
Yep.
Like a
needs that?
mentorship.
Yep, it's called
Babysit?
check-in, check-out, and it's a part of all of our buildings. Yep,
Okay.
yep. Mhm,
We'll be changing,
mhm.
the high school, the good old-fashioned study hall this year is going to transition more into an advisory, where those staff members will have a small group of students that they'll be, will have some, weekly activities, getting to know them, checking in, watching their grades, those type of things, absolutely.
That's good. Yeah.
We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's cool.
Anything else, Matt? All right, moving on to the second one was that whole marketing and communications piece. Basically, support the creation and implementation of a comprehensive marketing and communication strategy designed to enhance engagement with students, staff, families, and the broader community while promoting transparency. We're looking to participate in a work session with Craig and Kirk to determine, kind of what we're thinking, some brainstorming type things like we're talking about. That bullet, all right, I mean, that was kind of just what I got out of that first part anyway. I talked to Craig about it, he thought it was a good idea for us to sit down and hash some of that stuff out. The next bullet, support the development of a detailed marketing and communication plan outlining target guidelines, key messages, and outreach strategies and communication tools. We talked about, as a board, we talked about hoping to have that done by in service, but when I talked to Craig about it, he thought that's probably a little bit too early yet. So I didn't put a date on here yet, where we can see some of those, what was that? Let me jump in here.
Well, I think we also talked about if we couldn't do it at the first, like all staff in service, like maybe early on in the school year.
And that still might be too early, I guess is why I didn't put a date out there.
So what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Well, we haven't had our brainstorming session yet, so,
I think we have to do the brainstorming session, and then I think October, November, we would have a draft of a plan for you guys.
Oh, okay.
I
So you're still thinking early
Yeah.
school.
I think that's could be reasonable.
Yeah, given the fact that we had this brainstorming session in either August or early September.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so I'm sorry, support the development of a detailed marketing communication plan, yada, yada, yada. The other one is just kind of that whole multi-channel websites, district news, social media, type of thing. Kind of just make sure that we're on par with that, encourage it. Implements mechanisms to gather and incorporate stakeholder feedback on those communication effectiveness, at least annually through whatever surveys, forums, or other engagement tools. We are looking for, again, goal doesn't have to be biannual. The communications department summarized, and I gotta obviously get some consistency in what I wrote in here, but as far as the department and position and stuff, but summarizing key initiatives, engagement, data successes, and opportunities for improvement. And then, again, just kind of increase that visibility and storytelling of student, staff, school achievement. Anything we're missing?
And should we set our little
Our
work
brainstorming
session?
Our brainstorming session, yeah.
Like after a light agenda meeting or something like we're doing tonight.
This is a pretty heavy agenda before.
Yeah, this is,
But we're only meeting once.
yeah.
So, I mean, I'm assuming.
Or a different day.
Whatever you folks decide.
I
We'll
think
be
we
here
should get it on the
with
calendar, the
whatever's
sooner the
needed.
better.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
Or do we want to look at this second board meeting date in July? Where if we're not going to have a regular meeting, just have that.
I know Kirk will be otherwise indisposed that evening
Oh.
because of the conversation we had earlier tonight.
So will I.
So, right now, the second meeting in August is oh, that is a guaranteed meeting, isn't it? I'm sorry, yeah.
Your first
Well, the
meeting
first
might be
meeting
light.
should be more just committee type stuff, so that'll be a little bit later.
Yeah, so that's August 13th. We could slate that for, say, a 6:30 or 7 o'clock start.
We're gonna put on it to start immediately following.
We totally can post it that way.
Um,
August 13th, everybody good with that?
Yeah, Kirk?
Which for me,
So will this be a true board meeting or just posting it because you have a quorum?
We post it as a work session, there'll be no action taken. I don't know what you would take action on. Because from that, we'll develop the plan, and then the plan you probably want to approve,
you know,
but that would be later.
yep. All right, the next one is that kind of that excellence in leadership and organizational support. It's kind of got a plethora of things in there, but committing to strong leadership and proactive organizational support to sustain financial stability, prioritize student achievement amid evolving enrollment and fiscal landscapes. Utilize, we talked about data on future enrollment trends and all that kind of stuff, with a priority on retaining students within the district by understanding family needs and enhancing the district offerings that encourage families to stay. I'll just stop at that one. What do you think of that bullet? Good, all right. The next one is encourage innovative financial planning. I think we may have got a little creative on this one because we don't have a lot of creative planning, but maximizing existing resources, explores new revenue opportunities, and build sustainable reserves for the future. We talked about this a little bit this morning.
The problem is that we're not an independent private entity that can either cut staff or decrease costs to create a product. I mean,
Start selling something.
well, if that's the road you want us to take, we're able to do that. And we have built-in child labor, you know what I'm saying? So, we can do some of these things, but, no, in all seriousness, if you're talking about like evaluating the necessity of a levy override referendum, yeah, that's guaranteed. Those are new accessible dollars that we could have access to. How would we spend them? What would we do? If you're talking about, identifying new funding mechanisms to educate kids, the answer to that question is they don't exist. It's what the state gives us. It's what we generate from a levy override referendum, and that's it. I mean, there really aren't other venues. Now, we pursue grants. We look at opportunities to bring dollars into the district in somewhat creative means, but on the same hand, those aren't sustainable models for like underwriting the district's budget. So I want to be very clear on that. That's not the role. We don't have someone that's able to spend that kind of time to generate revenue to the degree that's necessary when you're talking about on average about $12,000 a year spent to educate a kid. So I mean, 10 kids is $120,000. If we can raise $120,000 annually, I don't think we want that going towards just educating our kids. That's the state's obligation. See what I'm saying? So these are some things that are tossed around in my mind. Now, admittedly, In every district I've been at, I've been involved in, I've passed several referenda over a several-year period of time, because the way the structural deficit that's been created with the school funding formula, it's just not sustainable. If you want to do anything facilities-wise like this, you're going to need to pass a bond issue referendum. If you're going to do anything that it means enhancing aspects of the school district beyond what you have accessible to you in the state budget, it means either increasing enrollment, which I'll come back to because I have some points to make in that regard, or B, passing a levy override referendum. What ends up happening in the state of Wisconsin based on the funding formula is that as you lose kids, because of the 3-year rolling average, there's a tail off in how you lose access to those funds. And there's also a little caveat that's called the declining enrollment exemption that gives you a little bit of a boost, so it takes a bit of the edge off as you lose on the 3-year rolling average. This is not a formula created by me. This was created by the legislature many, many moons ago, and the legislature refuses to change it because they look at it and they go, holy crap, this is super complicated. And everybody goes, yeah, that's why we need to change it. And then they go, no, we're not doing that. Because it's a massive undertaking. There's no question. And there isn't any kind of budget that can be adopted unilaterally, a mechanism that can be changed, and then all of a sudden now it's fair for everybody involved. It just doesn't happen. And so whenever the legislature begins conversations on updating their school funding formula, it has never happened. And that's been true for the last 20 years. It may in the future, but I'm just saying there's not a lot of willpower to make that happen. With that being said, we're beholden to the number of kids we enroll. I think if you're looking at this in terms of a marketing standpoint, the aspect that you're going to find the most dividends, if you find any in that regard with pupil enrollment, is in terms of open enrollment. Because we have very little authority to court a family to live in the district, right? I mean, it's a great place to be, but if someone works in Minneapolis, they're probably not going to choose St. Croix Falls if they find something that meets their bill in Forest Lake. You see what I'm saying? And I don't know that the school district, what the school district can offer, that's going to set itself apart to the degree that the needs of the family or the kids vastly outweigh what they could get at a different public school district in closer proximity to where they work, or other family, or whatever the case may be. I'm not saying we're not involved in that process. If the city engages in some kind of campaign, or the chamber in some kind of campaign about getting people who want to live in St. Croix Falls, I think that's great. I mean, more people the better. But if we're talking about legitimately drawing people to attend school where you have an impact immediately or almost immediately, it's the open enrollment. I would also cite that over the last several years, the trajectory of the district has had a flip in positive open enrollment in and a very low open enrollment out, where in the old days it wasn't that, it was a bit more lopsided the other direction. So those things are moving in the right direction. But the last thing, and probably the most important thing that I'm going to say, is we can't make people have more kids. And this is happening across the state of Wisconsin. I'm not saying there's not things we shouldn't do. I would never say that. There are things we should do. But I think one of the conversations that individuals are blind to is the structural deficit, particularly in the state of Wisconsin. We have way more people that are retirement age than we do in the workforce and than we do that are having kids. And if people are having kids, they're having one or maybe two. They're not having 6, 8, or 10, or even 3 or 4 in many cases. And so that's true in Hudson, of all places. If you recall, not too long ago, Hudson was talking about building new elementary schools and making their high school larger. And I'm not saying that wasn't required at the time. It was. They were busting at the seams, and they had 30 kids in classrooms and so forth. And I can guarantee you there wasn't a demographer that provided them details that said by 2025 you're going to be closing elementary schools and be down nearly 1,000 kids or 600 kids in your enrollment. There's no way that people saw this coming to that degree. So the only caution I put to this is around ensuring that we're rational with respect to what we do have control over and how we can proceed down the path in a reasonable fashion. There's 40 places that are going to be sold over here and occupied in relatively short order. And as of now, we're aware of potentially 7 students that's going to impact us by. 7, not 70, 7. So that's not because we're doing anything we're not supposed to be doing. That's, again, what's happening in virtually every area in the state of Wisconsin and across the nation. I mean, people have identified we need people to have more kids. I'm not saying it's not going to trend up in a few years. I'm not saying it's going to continue. I don't know. I just wouldn't put a lot of credence necessarily, and when you pay a demographer to do a population analysis and an enrollment analysis, that comes with a dollar figure. I'm just gonna be honest with you, I don't know what the number is. If that's the route we wanna go and look into that, more than happy to. But, and I'm not saying they're doing it incorrectly, because they do it very scientifically and they're doing the best job they can. I would have sincere concerns about the applicability of it much past, 5 years. And then the question to me becomes, what's the point? If I can't tell you what's gonna happen here in 2035. See what I'm saying? So those are just some pieces, and I think the goal, I don't have a problem with the goal, but I want it to be couched appropriately, because if it's a goal that is, as it's worded and interpreted by me just reading it, it's not achievable. Like, it's not gonna happen, particularly in 1 year. And I would argue we don't have control over some of the things that we think we may in order to accomplish the goal. So I just wanted to raise those things. Now, moving down that path and better understanding what our population's gonna do and paying for a study to be done, we can do all of those things. I've got no problem with that. But articulating explicitly what are we gonna do and heads are gonna roll if we don't get more kids to come here might be something that Jesus, if he were walking the earth right now, couldn't do. See what I'm saying? So we just need to be rational around what that actually looks like. Now, in the area, if I were a parent and could live anywhere that I wanted and had the capability, and I don't mean to disparage our neighbors by making this statement, but I had the capability to send my kid anywhere I wanted because both my wife and I work from home and this is the community we want, why wouldn't you choose here? You certainly would. And I don't think that that's, in the area, an unknown statement. I honestly don't, from what I've heard among people that are from the area, but not necessarily from here. But then the question is, why isn't that happening, number one? And number two, for a reason that I mentioned, I'm just throwing it out there. Number two, that's not a global message you can really get out there to much greater than the geographic area, because in most cases, you're not coming from Milwaukee to St. Croix Falls or from Des Moines to St. Croix Falls. Now, that happens, but that's not like a pipeline that you can establish.
When I remember the discussion that we had when we were coming up with our board goals, the two things that really stood out to me in the discussion related to finances was looking at creative ways to increase open enrollment, and then acknowledging that we as a board have created goals over the years that have cost money, and we want to be cognizant of that as a board, that we got our nurse, we got our school resource officer, we have our marketing specialist now. So we've done these things that have cost money, and we want to be cognizant that at the end of the day, our job is to educate children. And so a lot of our conversation was around how do we be good fiscal stewards of the money entrusted to us. It wasn't so much about finding these magic pots of gold at the end of the rainbow or creating students out of thin air. It was more about being cognizant of the money that meeting our own goals has cost the district, and being aware of how those funds come to us and how we use them.
And as far as open enrollment, I think what we were kind of talking about was simply, say you live roughly in the area, and encouraging or at least supporting that differential, like that net in versus out, by, for example, a website, for example, that, or, current website, but with some additional features, things like, when a young family or something is trying to make their decision, a lot of times they'll go straight to the website, and if they can, the mom or the dad is into drama, and they can see a video tour of the Fine Arts Center. Mom's a big golfer. You can see, they've got golf. That checks a box. They've got daycare. That checks a box. Is there a, I mean, don't.
It's a wait list.
I suppose especially larger school districts that are like super competing. There's 5 schools in town. They're really competing with each other, and they're going to try to make their school all their best features are right there. Or you could, schedule a tour of Secret Falls Elementary. I don't know, things like that.
Yeah, the other piece that's incorporated into this goal is with respect to ensuring that the strategies, or the facilities, pardon me, are modernized and safe and flexible. And again, outside, if we're going to do that, we're gonna pass a bond issue referendum.
Yes.
There's no other way to do it. And I think this idea too, Matt, I don't disagree with you at all. The question for me is, how do you consume that, and how does that get out there? Because it's quite clear, I mean, we send communications to families, and we send communications to staff members, and they don't read them. You know what I'm saying? And as a parent, there's certain things that I got from my kid's school district, maybe I sent, the only reason I knew it was on there is because I wrote the darn thing. You see what I'm saying? So we have to understand and articulate too what's transpiring with reality in society anyway. But that's not to say you don't do these things. Talking about like safety and security, that was an excellent conversation we had today at the admin team. If we're going to do that, which I believe we need to do, we're going to have to pass the bond issue referendum to do that, period. There are certain things that are going to cost money that we have to do, and you can't achieve those goals just by being fiscally conservative. Because again, we don't have the capability of making our operations leaner and pocketing more money, or selling at a higher profit, or a higher profit margin and pocketing more money. See what I'm saying? We don't have that capability with respect to what we have. We also have been right-sizing ourselves and not filled 3 or 4, I think we're 4 FTEs that we didn't fill this year. That comes at a cost too. There's commentary from staff members, and I haven't heard from community members, but I'm sure among community, they're not filling that. But, so we have to articulate this in a rational fashion that also shows that we're operating within the context of what we have access to as an organization that's publicly funded. You know what I mean? And I think of like facility-wise too, are there incremental things that have been done? My God, look around. And this school from 1982 is still beautiful. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
But are there things we need to do to modernize it? Absolutely. Talking to Brian Craig, updating our cameras that are most of them are in the 12-year-old range. And if you have 12-year-old electronics, what do you do with it? Throw it away and get something new. $250,000 for you to do that across the board. So I think if what we're engaged in is a goal around fiscal stability and revenue generation, then we need to also talk about a bond issue referendum and or a levy override referendum in order to achieve those goals. Because you're not going to move the needle. And we're going to talk about the budget in the board meeting, and I'll be uncharacteristically brief, because once again, they didn't do squat. And here's the governor saying massive investment in public education. Nope. Here's the legislature, massive. It's not. It just flatly isn't. And when we've had double-digit increases in inflation and costs of doing business, and you can say, oh, don't give your staff a raise, don't pay for benefits. We have to employ people.
Amen.
So you start to see, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit, I'm going to lose my mind, so I'm calming down. But when I read these things, that's what goes through my mind. And again, I'm not blaming board members. I totally get it. Again, it's not an inappropriate thing, but that's what comes to my mind around all of these factors that admittedly we have very little control over. And when there's commentary about, being fiscally conservative, which clearly I've never witnessed this district or any other Franklin been involved in that's just like, hey, oh yeah, hell yeah, it's taxpayer money, what do we care? That's never been the approach. And that's why the high school from 1982, by and large, if you attended here in 82, you're like, oh my God, it's the same high school I attended in 82. Yeah, it's over 40 years old. Yeah, the same thing. I mean, you'll have a building that's almost 100 years old. The same thing. You do what you can do, right? But if we are going to incrementally move the needle, and we are going to create, like if you did a fly-through on a drone into this performing arts center, and by the way, there's some kids putting on a play or a practice at the time, and put that out, absolutely that's going to get some stuff. But make no mistake about it, if it was at the CAFNA Gymnatorium at the elementary school, nobody give a crap. Because that was done in, I'm sorry, Rita, sorry. Because that was done in 2008, and it's not the biggest, new, greatest, hottest thing, you know what I'm saying? So some of these things, I just, the encapsulation of reality in terms of what we face with budget constraints, what we face with kids and the jobs that our people have to do, and then expectation on top of that, it has to be balanced. And we have to recognize that almost everything that we do is going to cost money. And it's not because the people that are employed here are, you know, living like kings and queens. That's not really the reason, although that's the primary reason that people point to. We need to employ people, you know, who have a job to do. So I promise I'm done now. That's my little pontification on that one, although I do understand the tone and tenor. I'm not hollering, hey, that's not my point. I just want to provide that
Craig,
backdrop.
am I allowed to make a comment on something? I don't know what I'm allowed to do in a board meeting. Usually we just keep our mouths shut unless we're spoke to. But I heard you saying that you meant these goals differently. Would it be possible to change the first bullet to something like investigate creative ways to capture open enrollment? And the second bullet to investigate a system by which you run your decision-making through a series of questions before making financial decisions. Because Craig is obviously right. We can't make money out of thin air, but you can at least have a process by which you decide, do we even think we want to? To me, that sounded like what you were saying.
That sounds more like what we were getting at.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought you articulated it really well. It's being responsible for the money we're entrusted to.
I hear Craig saying that perhaps bullets 2 and 3 aren't necessarily part of our annual goals because as financial decisions come forward, we're going to have to make them.
Without question. And I think too, we do these things. You see what I'm saying? You're going to know how our budget ended up this past fiscal year. Generally, you know, I'm not going to say every penny that the district spends, but pretty darn close, you know, with respect to what transpires. As do any taxpayers that want to know those kind of details. They have access unilaterally to all the information that we have, and I'll sit down with anybody that wants to know where our dollars go. The concern for me is that I don't want it to be perceived as though these are things we're choosing not to do for some reason. Like, we have the money, we're just not going to do it. You know what I'm saying? That's not, I've never been in a school district that's in that boat, and frankly, St. Croix Falls is financially very stable. There's zero concerns in the short term that the wheels are going to come off, we're not going to be able to pay our bills. But that doesn't mean that we can spend widely, and that's been exhibited, in my opinion, right? When you have an understanding of the funds and where we're getting access to the funds and how is a new position paid for, but it doesn't have an impact on how we're educating kids. You know, we've talked about those things as they've moved along. So it's much more nuanced, and I would agree. I don't know about non-existent, but I think about some kind of permutation around we'll continue to be fiscally responsible while ensuring that we do our best to enhance district facilities to meet the needs of our changing student population, you know, whatever the case may be. So it can be written in such a manner that it's perceived as though this has been our business practice, and arguably it has been and will continue to be, but also justifying the fact that, yeah, if you have a 50-year-old building, you're probably going to have to do some things. And if you want to legitimately enhance security, you're going to have to do some things. And you can't do that based off of the state budget, the way they've handled us budgets the last 3 budget cycles. It's just not going to happen. Because again, access to new dollars is limited.
And the facilities one, you know, modernization is probably the wrong term. But I was thinking, you know, we do have a 10-year plan.
Yep.
And just basically supporting that. You know, we know we got some things that we got to do, and we're going to talk about boilers later, and you know, all that kind of stuff is, you know, the other word that you just said. No, I can't remember it. Anybody else remember what he said? Well, the facility.
Modernization.
No, not modernization. It was another word in that space, but.
I got the best words. Lots of words. I don't remember.
So, but it was a, you know, different word to put in there that doesn't make it sound like we were expecting to go out and, you know, redo the entire security system. I mean, it sounds like at some point we're going to have to do that. But, you know, but what I was thinking when I wrote that was just more along the lines of, you know, we got the 10-year plan. You know, we want to help make sure we have that on our radar, that we're, you know, encouraging, you know, to meet those things.
I think maybe those quarterly updates that are in the last bullet point could be how we do that. I mean, of course, we're going to support the 10-year plan. goal of ours, it's an expectation, and it's just part of how we roll.
The quarterly updates though are specifically about enrollment and staffing. And quarterly updates on enrollment and staffing in a district this size makes no sense. I mean, we can give you an enrollment update quarterly, but you're probably gonna say, we're gonna say it hasn't changed, or we're up one kid or down one kid.
Enrollment's not. Historically, we were getting, anytime there was new staff, we don't necessarily approve anybody that doesn't have a contract, but we would get quarterly reports on who's in, who's out, what's going on. So we kind of had a better idea of who the faces of our district were. And then we would get a quarterly financial update, just 25% of the way through our budget year, not 25% of the way through our heating year, but our budgeting year. And so where are we at with our transportation, with our central office, with our, each of our budgets. So Lorraine has pulled those together for us nicely. I think we want to continue to do those.
Gotcha. Part of the rub currently is this transition cumulative, you say, no. Just a
Well,
little bit of a hold up.
Transition what?
Cumulative, that's the new financial reporting software.
Yeah, I suppose.
So it is asking just for quarterly updates on finances and annual updates on enrollment and staff.
Oh, yeah, I got you. We can make that happen for sure.
So the other, I think, well, what about the, what is it, 1, 2, 3, the fourth bullet on retaining and developing? Is that all right?
Might that be where we would want to put exit interviews for staff and potentially leaving families? I know that we talked a lot about having a specific exit interview process so that we can get a pretty good idea of why people are leaving the district or why staff is, and I don't see that in here. I didn't try to read it.
Well, I mean, that's, again, I was trying to pull us out of the weeds a little bit, but that
Sure.
could definitely be supporting strategies.
Sure.
In that, you know, and then
But I
having
think if
this
the admin team
conversation.
never hears that we want
Right.
these exit interviews, then we're not gonna get exit interviews. As long as that's on our admin team's radar and they don't have concerns about that, then.
Exit interviews for families would be probably something that they were emailed, I would guess, if they're willing to fill out a survey. Exit interviews for staff are a little easier, but I would also argue all of that would be voluntary.
Yes, of
Right.
course. Yep, but perhaps we'll be some insight out of it tonight. It's always good to hear from people coming in. When you do the interviews, we celebrate people coming in. It's nice to know what's causing them to go.
All right, so for bullet 2 and 3, are we scrapping them or just changing the wording of them?
Was what Craig was getting at is something along the lines of not, like, or more just continuing to be financially, like, more just kind of ongoing?
Kind of like Rita's
Rita's
approach to saying, hey, these are the questions we're gonna ask ourselves when we're making larger financial decisions. I don't know what the questions might be, and I would look to somebody smarter than, or not smarter, but within the realm of education to help guide us on.
There's nobody smarter than you, Brian.
Oh, clearly. But, I kind of like the idea. I don't know what other board members think and how hard that might be.
Would we wouldn't have to write that necessarily in the goal of like, where, like, we can just develop those questions, right? As part of our goal that we would ask before we make a larger financial. So it could just be like generalized, I think.
Yeah. I think something around ensuring continued financial, sound financial management while still investigating and potentially investing in updates to facilities and infrastructure and programming to meet the needs of, our student population and community today, or something like that.
That adapt to changing needs.
So that's kind of like bullet 2 and 3 being combined.
Mind clarified and perhaps taking your stress level down 3 notches, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I mean, the stress I would have is, for example, if we want to identify and build sustainable reserves for the future, you pass a recurring levy override referendum. That's the really only way you can do it.
So, yeah, I mean,
You
so
know
that
what I
has
mean?
to come out of our goals if that's.
Well, and if that's what we want to do, game on. give me the green light, and I'll put it together, and we'll make it happen, you know what I'm saying? But that's what I'm saying, is you're beholden to the state, and then I guarantee there's gonna be a conversation during my time here, if it's longer than, you know, God willing, 5 years or so, we're gonna have to ask for additional dollars, either in terms of a bond issue or levy or override, just the way things are going, there's almost no question in my mind. And I don't have a problem with that being a goal, I just have a problem with making sure that we all recognize that there's no other magic pot of money we can go to renovate facilities and or continue doing business if the state's not gonna step up and do what they need to do.
And some of this, you know, and I don't know if this changes your thought at all, but, you know, it's more long-term. I mean, these are annual goals, I get it. But, you know, when we start looking at, you know, the enrollment, you know, when you talked about the 3 years, you know, all that kind of stuff, you obviously got a great grasp on that. But what, you know, what else do we need to start thinking about? You know, yeah, we can pass a referendum, but, sure, I mean, that would, it's probably gonna be something we have to do at that point, but what other types of things, you know, when we start thinking more long-term? You know what, at some point, right, if enrollment keeps going, I mean, yeah, you're talking staffing or, you know, cuts and those types of things, right? So we're not there at this point, so maybe it's a little premature to be doing that, but I guess that's where I was just like, all right, well, long-term, we want to make sure that we're, if balance, I don't want to say downsizing either, but if that's the way we're trending, you know, what is going to be our plan?
Yeah, well, and the other option you have too is to identify short-term and long-term goals. Because if you have a long-term goal around, you know, financial stability, understanding the economic pressures of being a publicly funded institution, then what it looks like today is going to be much different than what it looks like 5 years from now. Because no one can predict, no one can even tell you what the next biennial budget is. I didn't even know until they signed it into law last week. See what I'm saying? So I think you could ferret that out. Again, if it's included as an annual goal, to me, that's an annual goal. Like, we're gonna do these things during the course of this year, or begin to identify these things, or at least start to make some progress.
So Brent, if we are keeping those bullet points, I think we can keep the first line of the first bullet point and then remove everything after explores. Because we can't generate new revenue and we can't build sustainable reserves. Or, I'm sorry, the second bullet point, the two we're considering.
Yeah, I get it.
And then, so we're encouraging innovative financial planning that maximizes existing resources while continuing to provide safe, flexible, and inspiring learning environments that adapt to changing needs.
Yeah, okay, you're combining.
Yep, but leaving out the modernization because that isn't part of a one-year goal. We're not looking to pass a referendum, build a new building, modernize anything drastically this year. Review is what we do anyway, the plans and stuff, so. We want to maximize our existing resources and provide that safe, flexible, and inspiring learning environments that adapts to changing needs. Continue to do that. Does that resonate with board members? Does that sound like a goal we really believe is meaningful and worth pursuing? Does it make sense to our admin team?
Does to me.
Yeah.
All right, I'll throw something together and have you look at it.
Okay.
You're the one that said all that, I just write
Yeah,
down.
well, we're not gonna approve these tonight
Right,
anyway,
exactly.
so it'll come back to the whole board, but yeah.
Right,
I'll-
but
If you wanna kick it past the first, that would be acceptable. And then as far as quarterly updates on finances, and then annual updates or as needed, we took question marks out. I think that once a year we should hear how our staffing is going and how our enrollment's going. But as needed, if we have some turnover or some different things going on. I think both those things are true. Okay.
last one is just kind of the support of our transitioning our new middle school principal. Keyboard's not working right now.
Mine, I just said the same thing.
All right, so the board will support a successful transition to the new middle school principal by ensuring the district administrator has the resources and support needed to foster strong building level leadership. Encourage and monitor a clear onboarding and support plan, which I should put in there is probably already in place, for the new principal, developed and overseen by district administrator. Now, I know Rita's, what do we call that? The mentor.
We couldn't find anybody better.
In the end, I mean,
As a matter of fact,
you're still overseeing it, all right?
Yes. I'm totally kidding, just so that everybody out there
But I
knows.
like how Ronnie flipped that. Go ahead and say that
It's
again,
just making a
Ronnie.
joke.
As a matter of fact, you couldn't find
Because
anybody better than Rita.
Rita's the perfect person to do it.
Then the others are just kind of promote a culture of collaboration, visibility, and open communication between the principal, staff, families, district leadership. Just making sure we're all there to help each other and everything else, and make sure families and et cetera understand, what's going on at that level. Any questions on that one, concerns?
Can we go back to the first one?
Oh, sure.
Is that one, is it already done? Do you have a clear onboarding and support plan?
Well, like, are you talking documented, like on a step one, step two sort of basis?
You don't have to report it to me, so not necessarily, but is there a clear plan for how we bring in our new administrators?
Absolutely.
Fabulous.
So he had the pleasure of spending over an hour with me, which he would probably put down as one of his favorite professional experiences thus far.
Absolutely.
He's gonna set it for professional development.
He's been assigned, and this is what, week 2 on the job?
Yep.
Yeah.
Day
He's
5.
been assigned Rita a mentor, and admittedly, the first week, he had his first admin team meeting today. He's still here, so there you go.
Yep.
And so the pieces of what the expectations are and the foundation is put in place, yes. And then we'll move through. So the first week he was on the job, I talked to him and said, look, I'm gonna leave you alone. Stay in your office, do what you need to do, walk around your building, figure out student handling, you know what I'm saying? And we met on the 9th, no. Yeah, we met was it this morning? No, it was the 8th.
Yesterday
Saturday?
morning.
Yesterday morning.
Yep.
Yeah, Tuesday morning,
Yep.
because you were at the golf wedding Monday. So we met Tuesday morning, and that kind of, more formally kicked it off. But do I have a documented step one, Chris is going to do this? And the answer to that question is absolutely not. Because being a principal administrator in a school district is much more nuanced than that. And he and I have to develop and cultivate a relationship as much as he does with staff members and students, and community members and parents. And that's not done through some kind of protracted, forced, documentation analysis. Now, with that being said, this December, as you will in every other December, we'll get an update with respect to the performance of all our administrative team, including Mr. Wallace, and including an opportunity to, evaluate myself, in addition to, at the end of the year, or whenever you choose to. So those pieces will be in place. He will be evaluated using our educator effectiveness evaluation system that all the other administrators follow. We will have to set goals, professional practice goal, and a school learning objective, and support student learning objectives for his staff members. So elements of these things, just because he's a new principal, some of these things roll into the fact that the onboarding process as a new administrator is more loosey-goosey than it is as a new teacher or a new aide. So he doesn't get the pleasure or pain of sitting with, first Lorraine, and then Kayla, and then Brian Craig, yet. So that stuff will come, and he has access to that, but that's much more learn on the fly, as you're really responsible for your building, and that's where we want you to be spending your time and your brain energy. And so some new staff might know how to do a PO request in the new system before he does, and he's supposed to be responsible for the building. I'm not worried about that. We're not worried about that. We're worried about him running the building. You see what I'm saying? So that's where I'm being a little bit wishy-washy. So yeah, there's absolutely a plan, although it isn't a step A through D sort of plan, or as regimented as like a new teacher orientation.
Well, and what support he feels he needs is different from what any other
100%.
might need from you, so so.
100%.
We can even strike that, we can even strike that bullet point.
I would be comfortable striking it.
The other thing I'd cite is here in particular, there's no question, any human being, if he asked a custodian, they help him. You know what I'm saying? So some of this too is about you taking the initiative to get your questions answered. And I have no question our admin team is gonna wrap around and do everything they need to do, because they did it for me, and of course they're gonna do it for him and anybody else that steps in. So, yeah.
All right, we'll get rid of the first one.
Yep.
Next one again is that to promote culture of collaboration, visibility, and open communication between the principal, staff, families, and district leadership. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
All right, the next one, we kind of talked about a little bit, his access, I don't know. I mean, it got the mentor, the operational tools, all that kind of stuff, but professional development, I'm assuming
Well, him and his team, PLC team, are actually headed to CISA doing MLSS or MTSS training,
The
multi-level
22nd,
systems
I
of
think,
support. So that's RTI based. Administrators, including Chris, can certainly access AWSA, their professional organization for PD. If they identify things, they can approach me and say, hey, I want to go do this. We have money available to do it, and we can make a decision at that time. There's, of course, professional conferences that transpire, but there's nothing that's mandatory unless we identify a deficiency or an area of concern, when we say, look, you need to, this would be something that's beneficial for you, either as an administrator or for your building. So then, you know, I recommend or I'm requiring you to go do this, although that's quite rare in my experience.
we, what's there?
Oh, absolutely.
You
Yeah.
Anything else with that one? Request a progress update, which you just talked about, to do that at roughly mid-year, whatever, but, so that one's good. And then, of course, recognize and celebrate the strong building leadership as a key driver of student success, school culture, and staff retention. That look good? All right, we have a hard stop tonight, so using the wrong things. All right, yep, thank you. That's where we're at. The financial piece, discuss a resolution to authorize temporary borrowing, which is something we do every school year.
That's correct, and that's a kind of a stopgap between the adoption and distribution of funds for the 25-26 budget, which of course is in process currently, as we were just made aware of said budget 3 days ago. So that's what that is, and you do approve it on an annual basis.
Any questions on that? All right, hearing that, none, we'll go on to the buildings and grounds and discuss the proposed preventative maintenance plan.
I gave you the commentary from Brian Warner in the board update. From his perspective, and I have no reason to believe it's not an accurate perspective, and that is, although it's slightly more expensive to work with Ahern, we will get a more robust and comprehensive preventative maintenance package through them for not much more money, and it thereby removes some of the responsibilities from our current custodial staff, freeing them up to do some other things.
Did we consider any other vendors?
Well, I don't think so. I think he went to Ahern because we were with Ahern in the past and because of the suite of things they offer for the cost.
Maybe I misread it, so we were with Ahern before, but then we had somebody else for the last few
No,
years?
we haven't had anybody.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, did we?
We
That's what I
did for
thought.
certain
Oh.
things, and that's why there's not really an apple-to-apple comparison. Let me go back to the board update and let you know.
Yeah, it's not good.
He said, because he did say what company it was, and I don't remember. Last year, we used NAC to do our annual boiler maintenance at a cost of $15,675. So I don't know who NAC is, but that's who we used in the past. And that was for boiler maintenance.
This is a much more.
Correct, because it's boiler,
And
AC coil cleanings, recirc pump maintenance, chiller maintenance, that kind of thing.
one of the questions that came to my mind when I was reading through this, when we have this service, do they come out and, or is it like a once a year type of thing? Or no, they talked about different spaces, but I guess my question is, in the time of the year when there's a lot of pollen, your coils and stuff on your AC units need to get cleaned off. Are they doing that, or are we sending guys up there to do that?
They are gonna do it, from what I understand, annually, but I'm sure periodically, there's still
Okay.
times that we gotta do things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're gonna do cleanings and inspection and maintenance, which is much different than just running up there and,
Yeah.
you know, the difference between having the HVAC guy come to your house and work on your AC system versus hosing it off with your hose because you got cottonwood trees in your neighborhood, that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Any other questions on that?
No, the annual cost of an additional $5,500 just seems very reasonable, and we've gone from just boiler maintenance to the chiller, the circulation pump, the external clip things. We've added a lot of service for
Correct.
a reasonable amount of
Right.
money.
Yep.
And service that I don't know why we would expect our custodial staff to perform.
Any other comments, questions on it? All right, we'll move to the board meeting. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll start with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call.
Nat Bryce,
Here.
Tashina Rager. Here. Don Milky. Here. Ronnie Schuler.
Here.
Brett McCurdy.
Here. All right, can we get the reading of the mission statement, Matt?
Yep.
And the rules?
The mission of the school district of St. Croix Falls is to provide a supportive, student-centered learning environment that cultivates character, fosters academic excellence, and embraces diversity. The board meeting rules focus on the mission and vision statements of the district. Come prepared, be respectful of others, and open accepting of ideas. Actively participate, avoid side conversations. Remember, board meetings are open forum.
All right. Thank you, Matt. We'll go to principal's comments. We'll start with you, Rita.
Okie dokie. We had a great summer school, 130 students. I forgot what the three, this has been a long meeting. I didn't know what I wrote. Every kid worked on the 3 R's, which is reading, writing, and arithmetic, in connection with nature themes. We have owl experts, insect experts, official junior rangers, and kids who can tell you anything you want to know about caring for all types of pets. The child care counts subsidies we already talked about, so we're thrilled to have more money coming into the child care set. Kids Care has 80 kids enrolled with an average of 50 a day, which is a lot. We just moved to the Dresser Elementary School and we'll be there through August. We're fully staffed with the best SCF high school students and alum you could imagine. It is a dream staff. You should go visit it. It's just unbelievable. And the transportation department leadership team is continuing to clean up procedures and processes. We are fully staffed. I have professional development scheduled for tomorrow with a director of transportation from another district who's going to show me some things and share some ideas, and we are excited for next year.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Wallace, you're on day 6 or 7?
Yep, day 5 actually, back being in the building, so yeah. So, happy to be back, just getting settled into my space and relearning some ins and outs of how things operate in our building. A lot of old faces that I've known have stopped by, will welcome me back. Meeting some new ones as well. I'm looking forward to meeting the rest of the folks that are in my building here. Right now, the deep clean is well underway. Our custodians are working real hard. Brian's interviewing for the vacant position here. I think he's got a couple scheduled for this week yet. And hopefully we have that position filled here in short order. Beyond that, happy to be back and ready to get started.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have something from Mike?
So glad you're here.
I do not, aside from what we've been sharing the board update,
Okay. That's
because we weren't certain how quickly we'd get to this, so.
All right, Craig, your comments.
You want a few on the budget?
No. Such a
We've heard a lot of those words, like Don said.
So we're sorry, Sheriff.
You want more work? We're done, I'll be done. So ultimately, and honestly, I will be brief because frankly, not much happened. And it's a little disappointing. We retained the per pupil adjustment. If you recall, that was a point of contention. The governor did the line item veto to make it 400 years or something like that, a $325 per pupil increase. So that remains. That was not backfilled by the legislature in any capacity with respect to equalized state aid, which means it'll be made up 100% in local property taxes. So $325 per kid. If you do the math on that, 325,000 times $1,000 or 1,000 kids, pardon me, is not a lot of money in terms of continuing to do business. So, you know, that's where we're at. And this is in year one of the 25-26 budget is 325, and then in year two, there'll be another 325. So 650 over the biennium, no increase in equalization aid. And then the other piece, there's some minor other pieces. The other piece that is impact on our bottom line is reimbursement rate for special education went from 30.6% it's in this year to 42% and 45% in fiscal year 27. So 42 in year one of the budget, 45 in year two. Quick calculation, at 30.6%, we had 495,000 we got in categorical aids for special education aid during 24-25. That's an estimate. So clearly, the change from 30.6 to 42 is about 11 point. It's not about. It is 11.4%, which is roughly $55,000 or 60,000 on the high end. A little caveat that I'll put in there for you is that that's not a sum sufficient figure. So when that special ed aid is doled out among the districts, it's based off of a need and prorated based off of the available bucket, not increased to fill 42% for everybody. So not sum sufficient. I've heard some commentary, I won't say who, and it wasn't me, but I would be shocked if we see anywhere near 42%, and that's a direct quote. Because again, it's not sum sufficient. So if you talk about overall the budget impact because of the wildly massive investment we just made into public school kids in the state of Wisconsin, set on both sides of the aisle, just for the record. That's a total of probably change 300 and maybe $350,000 for next year. That's insane. Just gonna say. One staff member making a new hire making $50,000, $55,000, $56,000, $60,000 a year is in a family policy is $90,000 plus. So do the math. Do the math. And making 50 grand a year, come on. You make 50 grand a year now at Quick Trip in a non-managerial position. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. That's the budget. It is what it is. There is also an increase of reimbursement rate, high-cost special ed aid from 50% to 90%. You think to yourself, wow, that's insane. What an increase. The problem is that high-cost special ed aid has to be so absorbently high, and you're talking about might impact in a district like us, one kid. So you got specialized transport, you got a one-on-one aid, you might have some equipment that you have to purchase or whatever, and you talk about a $150,000 kid that's costing you in terms of providing those services, and you get a reimbursement rate of 90% of that instead of 50%. So not awesome, but also not horrible. I mean, I don't mean to complain about absolutely everything, but we're not going to have a lot of high-cost special ed aid that we get, which is based on circumstance. Some changes in mental health. Sparsity aid changes, transportation aid changes to a degree, but generally that was the bulk of the impact. So what I anticipate seeing is in new spendable dollars about $350,000 as we head into 25-26, which is better than zero, but not awesome. So there you go. And August, and then I'll shut up, I promise. In August, we will have for you an encapsulation, if we can get Gilligan to print our reports, an encapsulation of the 24-25 budget as well as the 25-26 budget projection. I don't anticipate any wild fluctuations. I think we'll see very similar things. I think how we end up this year, my prediction is that we'll be probably flat, maybe slight deficit, slight surplus, and I would argue we're probably going to see a similar projection for next year, although we haven't run the numbers, so we'll see. In the short term, we should be okay.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, other thing I wanted to mention, because it's my superintendent's comment, not related to budget. is the fact that we had some internal conversations with respect to building security and what that looks like when we start the school year with recent events. I wanted our community members and parents and board members to know that we're going to continue to take this seriously. I do think we have to have maybe a tough but rational conversation about what we can do in the longer term to enhance security updates here in the district, but that's not a conversation for tonight. It's some conversation or food for thought at some point in the future. Rest assured, we'll do whatever we can to ensure that as we start the school year, our kids are as safe as possible given what currently we have access to.
Was that on the 10-year plan too, the security system, or is that not?
Yes, but there are other elements, for example, like secured entrances at all of the facilities. The high school would be the primary concern there. Super easy at the middle school, super easy at the elementary, super easy at Dresser. Where you're talking about adding or just moving a set of doors such that when somebody buzzed entrance, they're in a breezeway and the only access point they have is the office. So they're funneled, they have to go to the office to check in. Of course, that's bulletproof or shatter resistance glass or materials that they're kind of encased in before they're allowed entry, or they sign in and get their visitor badge and allowed entry. At the high school, that's a whole different ball of wax, because we would have to do a fairly comprehensive renovation to make that happen. Remove the district office and have that be the high school office. Would probably have to be larger to accommodate the things that happen in the high school office, identify what we do at the high school office. So we'd be talking about, in order to do a secured entrance in that capacity, you'd be talking about a little bit of a flip-flop and more of an investment rather than $20,000, $30,000.
Might make more sense for the high school staff person in the district office, just something small.
So generally what we're doing now is we're going to have a high school staff person stationed at a table or a kiosk or, so we're still working through plans, installing monitors as a stopgap that are very visible to anybody in the high school office, primarily the secretaries that do the buzzing, as well as the district office, as well as Tammy's office, which is the whole boardroom now over here, so that it's very easy to identify who's standing there buzzing the buzzer, rather than the phone cue when it comes up. So there are things that we can do without making those comprehensive renovations. But even still, if you're operating in the context of the district office in terms of having that be the check-in point, that creates other issues, because of course the person devoted to doing that is going to be working on high school related things, and they're not in high school. They're engaged in more than just answering the door, is really what it comes down to. So, yeah, and if that's not functional, that doesn't work, then we can go on to do something different too, which might include changing people's responsibilities or roles, so. That's it, I'm done.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on, we don't have any presentations or awards or public comments, so we'll go down and I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
A motion by Ronnie,
Second.
second by Tashina. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, voting on policy 363.2 rule of the acceptable use policy. I'll take a that was one that we looked at the last meeting. I'll take a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve policy 363.2, rule acceptable technology use policy as presented.
Second?
There's a motion by Ronnie and a second by Don. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Move on to the vote on the deleting policy 363.2 exhibit A, B, C, and D, the old acceptable use policy, and the 1-1 technology program, acceptable use. I'll take a motion on that.
I'll make that motion.
A motion by Matt,
Second.
second by Tashina. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And next, we will have the vote on in-school employment for transitional age special education students. Again, this is what we talked about at the last meeting. I'll take a motion for that.
I'll I'll make a motion to approve and establish an in-school employment for transition aid special education students as presented.
Motion by Ronnie,
Second.
second by Matt. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next is, what is all this?
Academic
standards.
Yep.
Policy.
I'll make that motion.
So a motion by Don,
With, for the 25-26 school year.
Yes.
yes, that's right.
Update this.
Good catch.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
I can send it.
Motion, yeah, with the correction to the years.
Minutes will reflect 25, 26.
Perfect, then I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. The next would be adopting a resolution for, again, the 25-26 school year to possibly use independent hearing officers.
I'll go ahead and make that motion to adopt a resolution for the 25-26 school year to possibly use independent hearing officers to determine student expulsion cases per section 120.131E.
And Lorraine, did you notice that that has to have a date change again?
Mhm.
Yep.
Right,
Did I say, I said
Yeah.
25?
You did,
Okay.
you did.
I was
I
like-
just wanted to make sure
I'll
that she
second.
noticed that this was also.
yep, we have a motion by Tashina and a second by Don with the corrections to the year. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next was to vote on the crime reporting in the high school pursuant to the annual reporting requirements, which is what we talked about. Well, how do we just approve? We're approving it ahead of, we're just approving the policy?
No, you're approving the report, and as I said, as of now, we'll report 2 disorderly conduct. So that's what you're approving, I go and submit it.
We're essentially authorizing you to submit that report on behalf of the school district
Correct.
as required by state law.
Correct, and what you're supposed to do is having that report submitted, have seen the report.
Gotcha.
And rather than putting data in the fields, I verbally reported on that because again, it's July 9th.
We're not having
And
another
if
board
nothing
meeting,
changes
it's
between
something
now and the
budget.
31st, I'm submitting 2, and you'll hear nothing more about it. If something changes, you'll get an update because you'll have to have reviewed the final report. But this is what I believe is final, given circumstances.
So I'll make a motion to approve the crime reporting in our high school pursuant to the new annual reporting requirements. That's it.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Ronnie and a second by Don. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The 24-25 seclusion and restraint report, take a motion to approve that.
I can make that motion.
We have a motion by Don,
I'll second.
second by Tashina. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Next is the resolution to temporary borrowing between July 1st and June 30th, right, for the 25-26 school year.
Do we need to read that verbatim or?
I'll just put as presented.
Okay. Then I'll make that motion.
Motion by Ronnie,
Second.
second by Don. Do we need a roll call on
I
We
think-
can if
I think
you
you might
want.
as well. I don't know if it's required, but there's no harm if you do.
that? Roll call vote?
Matt Bryce,
Yes.
Tashina Rager,
Yes.
Don Milky,
Yes.
Ronnie Schuler,
Yes.
Brent McCurdy.
Yes. All right, and the next one is the vote on the proposed preventative maintenance plan for the HVAC systems that we saw not too long ago.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed preventative maintenance plan for HVAC through aliens as presented.
Motion by Ronnie,
Second.
second by Matt. Any further discussion?
Bryce,
Yes.
Tashina Rager,
Yes.
Don Milky,
Yes.
Ronnie Schuler,
Yes.
Brent McCurdy.
Yes. All right, upcoming announcements.
I do have one. I received from Tanya Milanowski in the mail with this beautiful Defenders of Wildlife card. If you know Tanya, you know that that's very near and dear to her heart. It says, St. Croix Falls School Board, thank you for the Menards gift card for my retirement. I will use it for house changes and improvements. Please know that this is truly appreciated. Sincerely, Tanya Milanowski, psychologist.
All right, thank you. Upcoming events, we got the financial audit coming up. Are we ready, Lorraine?
No, ever. Does the new cumulative or whatever, does that make it that much harder? Yeah, I can't pull any reports that show me any numbers.
Okay, so do you need a brick wall to beat your head against? She's like, no, I already have one. Thanks."
Pretty much, yeah.
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 Okay, how are we gonna resolve it? Need anything from the board? I
Well,
guess?
we're asking for support from Skyward to build us reports. I'm gonna reach out to other districts who might possibly have a report.
Okay.
It's just been trying, yep, so I can't give any concrete numbers.
Youch.
Mhm. Yeah,
Well, thank you. Somebody
Sure.
throw chocolate at her periodically.
Yeah,
please.
we have to-
it's been great,
We're keeping you in our thoughts.
thank you.
Fortunately, we do have a little bit of time. That'll go by quick. Our July 23rd meeting is probably not gonna happen.
I don't think it's necessary unless you want to have one.
And we've decided on when are we doing that?
August 13th.
August 13th, yep, so also the same day as the new employee in service. We'll also have a committee meeting with the marketing, community engagement / board meeting, brainstorming session on the 13th as well. The 18th will be the all teacher in service. I plan on being here for STAR, so I can cover the board as well. Anybody else wants to come, we can do that. If more than 2 of us want to be here, we'll have to post it. And then, August 26th already is our school in session. Summer school?
Yeah, no, Jumpstart.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, Jumpstart, yeah. And then we'll have a second meeting in August. And the official first day will be September 2nd. Matt, do you want to go over the rules of the meeting?
Sure. We focused on the mission, vision statements of the district, came prepared, were respectful of others and open accepting of ideas, actively participated, avoided side conversations, and remembered board meetings are open forum.
All right, thank you. With that, I will take a motion to adjourn to executive closed session pursuant to section 19.851C and F of Wisconsin statutes.
I'll make that motion to adjourn to executive closed session.
We have a motion by Tashina,
I'll second.
second by Don, roll call vote.
Matt Bryce,
Yes.
Tashina Rager,
Yes.
Don Milky,
Yes.
Ronnie Schuler,
Yes.
Brent McCurdy.
Yes. Great, we are in closed session.
Thank you, school board, thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you.
See ya. I'm gonna do that after we're done. Okay. I have to stop the shoot.
So,
You're good.
you gotta bring something.
Just in case for minutes.